Grief is a lesson that makes you stronger. Yoko Ono. Welcome to episode 2 of An Invitation to the Invitation, a limited chronological deep dive of the 2015 suspense drama written by Phil Hay and Matt Manfredi and directed by Karin Kusama. I'm your host, Jim Penola. On this show, I start by reading a scene or scenes from the original script, followed by an analysis of those scenes, subsequently discussing the differences between the screenplay and the final cut of the film, ideally shedding light on all the unique components that contribute to the movie, and how each of those elements fit into the greater thematic ideas of the story. Let's begin today's episode with a reading of pages 8 through 15 of the script, wherein the couple of Will and Kira are about to arrive at the dinner party. Exterior road, dusk. The car moves up the narrow road in the hills, headlights glinting off parked cars. Everything seems precarious somehow, dark and twisted. They drive past lines of parked cars, closely packed on the side of the road. Just a glimpse, unseen to Will and Kira. In one of the nearly identical BMWs, a man is sitting there, still and waiting. They continue up the street, pulling up to the house and stopping behind 3 other cars. The house above is a modernist masterpiece, hanging off the side of the hill. Sprawling, beautiful, a classic. Will cuts the engine. This was your house? A lot of money in Eden's family. No kidding. Wasn't ever mine. Exterior driveway, continuous. As they walk up the driveway, Will stops. The house, glowing from within, has an obvious hold on him, a power over him. Kira unconsciously makes a move to take his hand, but stops herself. They walk up the steps to the house. Exterior porch, continuous. Conversation spills out from inside. The door is ajar. A flash. Will's point of view. The same house, years ago. A young boy is visible in the window, doing a puzzle on a low table. Back in the present. Will pushes the door open. The people in the house turn to look at Will and Kira. We play across the guests' faces for a long moment. Men and women in their 30s, Will's friends. They smile, apprehensive. No one seems to know where to start. Finally, a woman breaks the spell, stepping toward Will and Kira. Gina, a lively presence, a quintessential East Sider. You're here, fucking A, I win. Was there a betting pool? Tommy, strong, mischievous, comes forward and kisses her. His partner Miguel stands back a little, smiling. For entertainment purposes only. Gina acknowledges Kira, smiling. I'm Gina, we met once a ways back, right? Oh yeah, right. Hi. Nice to meet you. Kira, you are looking so hot right now. I can't believe it. Will you please bear a child for us? We're not kidding. Tommy, impregnate. She laughs. So I see you two are having all kinds of problems getting along. Another 8 years of this is about all I can take. Then you can marry me or leave. You hear that? Tommy puts an arm around Will's shoulder. You look good, Will. You've shed that dirty dish rag vibe that has so concerned me. I look like a dirty dish rag? Looked like. Seemed. Were. Tommy leads him, arm still around his shoulder, into the sunken living room where Claire, intellectual and a bit awkward, sits next to Ben, a wry, vaguely stoned guy splayed on the couch. Claire gets up, hugging Will. Is this Kira? That's me. Without getting up, Ben nods to Kira and extends his hand to Will in mock formality. Hello, Kira. Hi, Will. I'm Ben. You remember me? We drove a thriving business into the ground together. It never thrived. It thrived like a motherfucker for 3 months, and you know it. Sorry we're late. Gina's eyes widen a bit, conspiratorially. It's been an interesting half hour. Will tilts his head inquisitively. You'll see. Where's Troy? I don't know. Late as usual. Can't get any reception up here either. Is Eden... A voice from the hallway. I'm here. Will turns towards his ex-wife's voice. As we see Eden, she is intimidatingly beautiful. She walks across the room toward them with a grace that's almost ethereal. She practically floats across the room. Kira can't help but be struck by the sight of her. Her eyes flicker to Will. "This is your ex-wife?" He steps forward to meet Eden. Eden hugs Will for a long time, finally pulling back. "Let me look at you, Will." She peruses him, arms draped over his shoulders, her face calm and beatific, her eyes searching his. Her manner seems very strange to him. He's taken aback. "I missed you." "Me too." "House doesn't look very different, does it?" "No, not really. We're so glad you're here." We notice something on Will's face, a tiny spot, a smudge. We realize it's a bit of the coyote's blood. Eden notices it too, and smiling, wets her finger and wipes the fleck of blood off Will's face. "You're a mess. And you're Kira? Hi, thanks for having me." Eden turns and beckons a very fit, very good-looking man. He comes towards them, eyes shining with powerful life, a strong focus. He wears a distinctive leather bracelet on his wrist. "You remember David?" "Of course, sure." A flash, David sitting in a therapy group, a stark circle, the greenish industrial light of a rec center. Colliding shots, he's crying, composed, head in his hands. Will and Eden watching him. Will's arm is around Eden's shoulders. David looking up, meeting Eden's eyes, a wreck. David moves past Will's offered handshake, straight in for a hug. "Very glad to see you. Really glad, man." "Hey, how are you?" "Brilliant. We have so much to talk about. We have so much to celebrate together tonight." He reaches over to Kira, pulling her out of her conversation and hugging her close as well. "Okay?" "Beautiful. Welcome. What can I get you to drink?" He turns toward the bar where many bottles have been set out. Tommy leans toward Will. "I'd go with the wine. It's an 85 Rothschild." Gina has overheard this. "Are you shitting me?" "What does that mean?" Tommy and Miguel look at him with pity. "Oh, Will. Isn't he sad?" Gina leans in. "It's like $8 million a bottle, Cro-Mag." David starts to pour the wine. "Please, $6 million. This night is special. We shouldn't put off enjoying what we have, since everybody's here, except Choi. Fucking Choi." People laugh, a well-worn joke in this group. Will sits down on the edge of the couch, away from the others. Fucking Choi. Right, well, we'll just have to start without him. He raises his glass, gaining everyone's attention. Just a few words. "This is a reunion. We've been away a long time, and you're all very special to Eden, and that means you're all very special to me." Everyone's attention is on David, but something else catches Will's eye. A movement in the darkened side hallway. Someone is standing there, watching them. It's a girl, maybe 21 or 22, wearing only a tight t-shirt, naked from the waist down. Sleepy-eyed, she stares directly at Will, a weird smile on her face. "We invited you here because we love you and we've missed you. We're all on a journey and we should be on it together." Will's eyes are fixed on her. She slowly breaks eye contact and drifts away into another room. This dinner is the start of that. We wanted to open the house again, to give it and us a new start. Everyone toasts, savoring the wine. "Hey, save a glass for me." The girl, now dressed, slinks out of the hall and up to David, who laughs as she grabs at his glass, kissing at his neck. Looks from Kira to Ben to Tommy. Who is this? There's something unsettling about her energy, skittish, an abused animal. On her wrist, the distinctive leather bracelet. "Sadie, meet my friends." "Hi." She laughs uncomfortably. "Hi, Sadie, I'm Ben." "So, how do you guys know each other?" Friends in common, I guess?" "We met in Mexico. Sadie's staying with us for a while, just helping out." "Yeah, it's fun. We have fun. I hope you don't mind me crashing the party. It's awesome." She looks at Will, almost conspiratorially. They've just told me so much about you. She trails off, still looking directly at Will. Ben clears his throat. Kira breaks the increasingly uncomfortable silence. We hit an animal on the way up here. It just came out of nowhere. There was nothing we could do. It was just in horrible shape. It was making this sound. Everybody looks at Will. How did you not tell us this, immediately? We had to kill it. It was suffering. You killed it with, a tire iron. I don't know how you did it, man. That's pretty butch. You did a good thing. It was mercy. Good. Will looks around, a little disturbed. He lands on Eden. She's just staring at him, serenely. Mind if I look around? Of course not. Will goes alone to the kitchen. Now, foremost, since this is of course not apparent in the script or the script reading, we need to talk about the opening title sequence, which is absolutely terrific, due in large part to the introduction of composer Theodore Shapiro's chilling score. I'd now like to read Karn Kusama's statement included in the vinyl release of the score, because it's an excellent peek into the joy and discovery that clearly took place in finding the perfect music to accompany the film. Here it is. Teddy Shapiro is, among many fine things, a great listener. In both conversation and in contemplation, he is a person who commits to listening wholeheartedly. I remember sitting in Teddy's studio as a lone violinist, and sconed in a recording booth, pushed his instrument towards all kinds of strange and unsettling sounds. Deep jarring plucks emerged from the speakers. Reverberant, sickly thumps seemed to suffuse the room. This was not what I thought a violin could sound like. Teddy was onto something, so he and his mixer, Chris Fogel, experimented further with those sounds, seeming to elongate and distort them. Suddenly, those lone string notes became both utterly singular and sonically huge. The sounds felt so bare, so uncomfortably alone, yet they also had a clarity of purpose and a bracing otherworldliness. These were sounds that told a story. Right after I left the studio, I called my husband Phil, also the film's co-writer and one of its producers, and exclaimed, "I think we've found our uncanny vibe." In retrospect, it was that spirit of playing around, not to mention just digging in and listening, that allowed Teddy to refine the vibe and give it a complete shape. Teddy built upon that solo violin, developing spooky tendrils of sound that would plume and recede like smoke inside a theater. He created a persistent, lonely melody that helped evoke a world of unease and alienation in cue after cue. I loved the blunt edge of the minimalist cues I'd heard, so I kept advocating for emotional sparseness. But Teddy rightly saw the value in engaging the heart of sorrow, and not just its horrors, so he wrote what would become the Loss theme, a melody of such fragile simplicity that it cut right through the teasing spookiness of the other cues and landed straight in the listener's gut. After creating all those terrifying sounds, Teddy managed to pull a rabbit out of a hat and make me feel a crushing sadness. I'm so grateful to Teddy for pushing the score towards that place of bittersweet longing, because ultimately, that was what most informed the story we all wanted to tell. Overwhelming grief and our attempts to deny those tidal waves of feeling is the narrative paradox that the invitation hopes to explore. Our hearts can hold many terrors, but it might be our capacity to feel that we're most afraid of. Teddy understood this tension and created a score both genuinely nightmarish and profoundly emotional. He listened to the sounds of the world we live in and played them back for us, in all their weird, wailing glory. If that's not a thorough and genuinely reverent account of the composer as well as the score's creation, I don't know what is. You may also recognize the quote I isolated for the beginning of episode 1, which was pulled from this exact statement. I particularly love Karn's description of that indelible violin theme. Deep, jarring plucks, reverberant, sickly thumps. The same plucks that loop on the Blu-ray menu and further burrow into your skull when you leave the TV on too long like I have. But she also says the score doesn't grant the audience a comfortable melody, and nor should it. The film is discomfort incarnate, and that should absolutely be reflected in the oral and musical landscape. With this unconventional theme guiding the blurry, long exposure takes of the opening titles, Kusama further sets the dark and dreadful tone for what would already be an anxiety-inducing event for anyone, especially one involving slightly estranged friends and exes. When the story picks back up, Will and Kira are arriving, pulling up to the house Will used to live in. Before they enter, though, we get a really interesting deleted scene, or deleted moment, because it's so fast. We're witnessing a figure sitting silently in a car, completely anonymous. Again, there's no wasted opportunity to build dread. And yet, for reasons not yet known, I can only assume that this stranger might be Pruitt, who of course we haven't met yet. So more on that in the future. Let's revisit that. We get even more backstory on Will's marriage to Eden. He lived in a gorgeous modern house with her, mainly thanks to Eden's family. The fact that Will always felt a level of disconnection to it for that reason makes the impending party even more weird and disconcerting. Thankfully, some of that dread is relieved in the many personalities we're quickly introduced to here. The eerily angelic Eden, the extroverted, lively presence of Gina, the light, humorous warmth of Tommy and Miguel, the sarcastic familiarity of Ben, the introverted, quiet honesty of Claire, the absence of Choi. We get these terrifically concise portraits of the supporting principal cast in a short amount of time, and of course, we'll get much more. It's the kind of scene that could be disorienting, and maybe is, but between the lean writing and the exceptional cast, it occurs just as it should from Will's point of view. There's a lot of attention thrust on him, and by extension the audience, but we're able to keep up because of the implied histories of each interaction. I really love Will's moments with Claire and Ben. Claire doesn't make a joke of any kind and is really just connecting sincerely in a more authentic way than everybody else. Conversely, Ben seems like the only person Will is comfortable joking with, hinting at this long, deep friendship. It's especially notable because, as Logan Marshall-Green describes in one of the behind-the-scenes interviews, Will's a party pooper for most of the movie, and we're going to see a lot more of that. So it's simply great and rare to see him suffer a joke and play along with a close friend. The most significant meeting, though, may be that of Will and David. David, maybe unsurprisingly, brings this overcompensating, very welcoming spirit that is undoubtedly meant to disarm for all the reasons we'd imagine. Played by Mikkel Heisman, who most know from Game of Thrones, David is seemingly innocuous, aside from maybe being performatively generous, which isn't surprising considering how new he is to the group. But his intentions will, of course, be called into question numerous times throughout the film. But for right now, in this scene, he's all warmth and generosity. Yet, for all the warmth that Will and Kira receive, there's still this persistent undercurrent of sadness. All these friends represent good memories, but that isn't necessarily a good thing, because good memories can become tainted, maybe even invalidated, drained of all the joy once associated with them, leaking like poison into our present. At least this is how we perceive it in our lowest moments, like the moments that Will is still experiencing, when we're slaves to an absence. As Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys sings, all these voices, all these memories made me feel like stone. All these people make me feel so alone. Will's grief is arguably multiplied in the presence of others, even his closest friends, maybe especially his closest friends. Not because he's introverted necessarily, but because they all reflect and triangulate his memories like sonar. They bounce around and gain momentum. Eden, Ben, Tommy, Miguel, Gina, Claire, Choi. We can all assume they all have their own unique recollections before the loss that's haunted Will. As a result, they paint a vivid picture of a treasured time that can't be regained. Eden, David, the house, all these friends, they're just a reminder of failure, or Will's failure, as a parent, a spouse, as a friend. But the failure, even if it is one, it may or may not be, the film keeps it under wraps, wisely. That failure isn't so much the problem, especially since it can't be rectified or changed. Rather, the issue becomes what Will makes that failure mean. And he seems to make it mean that he doesn't deserve happiness. He seems to make it mean that happiness is impossible. And maybe it should be for those around him, further fueling why the excessive warmth around him probably feels inauthentic, or at least wrong or incompatible. All of which magnifies the anger we know he still has. How is that anger going to manifest over the course of this reunion? It's a scary thought, and one I think a lot of us can relate to. As a family member recently told me, there's no such thing as an unexpressed emotion. Said another way, in the context of this film, Will's largely negative mass of feelings are all going to show up in one way or another, whether through words, actions, or both. And the way it affects those in his orbit is the real drama of the story, as opposed to the central question of Will's paranoia, which is more of an engine to arrive at and bring us to these varied and telling character moments. And speaking of character moments, I really want to acknowledge the supporting cast a little more directly. They're an ensemble. They're greater than the sum of their parts. They're believable and familiar and remind us of friends in our real lives. In my limited acting education, I still often think about the adage of no small parts, only small actors, and I can't help but think that applies here. Of course, we have to shout out Hay and Manfredi's deliberate, precise doling out of information and personalities through their dialogue and their script. But the actors make it soar through real-life friendships that were birthed on set as a result of everyone being forced into such a small shared set that the house was. I've seen some criticisms of the cast in doing research for the series, thankfully very little, but I still have to push back on that 100%. Firstly, I think the acting is completely right on the money. The cast find a strange mix of humor, drama, and levity, and more that's highly appropriate given the weirdness of the circumstances, given what a social minefield the setting is. Each performance a variation on how to navigate the awkwardness of reunions, especially when the squad has been tested by tragedy. Furthermore, the fact that there are no big marquee names, no George Clooney's, Jennifer Lawrence's, Brad Pitt's, etc., all of that works in the film's favor, since we have no baggage or preconceived notions attached to the faces on screen. And that way, they're blank slates for us. It even lends a degree of realism, since it becomes less about being a star-driven vanity project and is more about simply being an aching character piece, which was always the goal of the filmmakers. Going back to the quote at the top of the episode, "Grief is a lesson that makes you stronger," which, by the way, came into my orbit because Logan Marshall-Green retweeted it recently, is fascinating as it relates to the protagonist that Marshall-Green depicts. It's something I want anyone listening to consider as we trace Will's journey through the events of the story. Specifically, is Will's overwhelming grief fueling a transformation? Or is it maintaining a certain stubbornness? Keep in mind I don't necessarily have an answer to this. I'm careful to frame the question this way because I love thinking about a huge insight that one of my favorite critics, film crit Hulk, often brings up, which is what I'll call the fallacy of the character arc. I think most audiences are generally conditioned to criticize any fictional characters on the basis of an arc. How are they different by the end of the story? But Hulk argues that this is just one approach. Another approach is that the protagonist doesn't change by the end at all. In fact, they're exactly the same. The main character doesn't change. Our relationship with them does. The arc belongs to the audience. I think this idea is particularly relevant in this case because there's such a bizarre mystery element to the invitation. It's not a whodunit, of course, but the speed at which critical info is given to the audience is central to our perception. It's exactly why the ending of the invitation is so memorable and highly regarded, because it forces us to reevaluate everything we just saw, which makes for a hell of a rewatchable movie, one that seems to endlessly reward each subsequent viewing. So I'll ask once more, is Will's overwhelming grief fueling a transformation, or is it reinforcing his instincts? I look forward to answering that question with you. An Invitation to the Invitation is written, produced, and hosted by me, Jim Penola. Original score is by Jim Penola. Special thanks to the filmmakers and to the Penola family for their support. Please spread the word if you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next time.